Welcome to Soul Elevation, guiding your ascension to new heights. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and I'm recording this on Friday, September 12th. I want to talk about the importance of our critical thinking and of open discord. So, more and more, for a multitude of reasons, the invitation that we are giving each other for critical thinking and to have open dialogue that helps us to kind of push the boundaries of our beliefs and what we accept as reality is narrowing. This is happening for a multitude of reasons. But I want to give you some examples if you aren't sure what I'm talking about. Um, of the ways that our ability to think for ourselves and to have open discussion with each other is disappearing. So more and more, I mean, one thing that really jumps out at me as of very, very recently is the AI phenomenon. You know, that critical thinking that we're having, a lot of that we're just handing over to AI. We're getting so used to saying, "Tell me about this. What should I do about this? What should I think about this?" You know, and we're using AI to filter things down, to distill a lot of information, and to kind of tell us what to think. And that's concerning. So just be mindful of any habits that you're developing, that you're trying to take shortcuts, because AI can be so useful for us in cutting corners in so many things. But if you do find yourself saying, okay, here's a complicated topic, distill it down for me, just know that it's going to offer you a perspective, and that may be cutting into your own human right. I mean, not that it's trying to take your right away necessarily, but your own ability to think critically about different topics. If you're just saying, "Tell me what to think," AI. So that's one way that this is happening. But we are also policing each other. In the past few years, there is so much ostracizing happening when people put a perspective out there. There's so much censorship. There's technical censorship that's happening, you know, where technology has been created in such a way that, you know, you have to toe the line in terms of what you say, and things get taken down very easily. But there's also this policing that's happening just within social groups where, you know, people become targeted because they say something and it's too far out there. And so, and that's not necessarily a new phenomenon. But what happens is there are let me see how to say this, because of exactly what I'm talking about, you have to be careful about how you say things. So you're going to see me right now self-policing myself, self-censoring myself, because I'm trying to say things without overtly saying them so that I don't get punished in terms of the technology flagging me. And this is what's happening, where people are discovering more and more, they're understanding things more and more, and for a lot of different reasons, whether they don't want to sound crazy, they don't want to be ostracized, they don't want bots going after them, they don't want to be targeted, but also they don't want to be taken down. In terms of content being taken down, this is all real. This is what people are navigating, people who want to bring truth and light and to offer these perspectives that you're not going to learn about in the mainstream. You just won't. It's designed that way. So let's just imagine, I'm going to fictionalize this for you, right? Let's imagine that there is an alternative reality, not our reality that we live in, but let's just imagine that there were powers that were working behind the scenes, and these were not people that ever got elected. They were never on a ballot. They are not forward facing. They're not the heads of different companies. They're not people that are talked about in the news, but they hold enormous power. And let's just say that they were behind setting up the banks, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, and they control the finances and they control a lot of power. And let's just say that they also are the power behind industry, utility industries, medicine, um, media, and the government. Let's pretend that these these very, very few people are, no matter who is elected, they control everybody in a multitude of ways, through financing them, through giving them a lot of money, through blackmail. Um, if that were the case, then they control the media, they control the narrative that comes through the media, and they're not gonna expose themselves, and they wouldn't tolerate being exposed by anybody. And so they may also control the tech. They may control the technology, and as such, they may, in that case, they would be able to control what anybody has access to. So the information that's out there on social media or on a platform like this. And if they were to hear things that they don't want exposed, then they would shut it down. And so if that were ever to become the case, then it might it might do us well to think about critically beyond what we're being fed, because there would be a narrative within the mainstream media that would ostracize and ridicule and make people look crazy for saying things that are so outlandish that they couldn't possibly be true, even when there is evidence that backs it up. There In that case, there would be a concerted effort to suppress information, and then people who are trying to expose it would be ostracized and taken down. Their content would be taken down. So, if you had the ability to think critically, to think for yourself, and to try to make connections to things that oppose the narrative, because if that were ever to be the case in that pretend scenario that I gave, then whatever you're being fed by the masses and by the mainstream, and you just take it at face value and you say, oh, okay, well, if the major networks are telling me this, that's who I trust. And I'm not going to think about it any deeper than that. Then you would just be falling for an illusion. But if you've developed the ability to think critically and to say, okay, well, maybe I'll hear what the mainstream is saying. I'll hear what the news outlets are saying. Let me weigh that against content that is alternative. And let me expose myself to other content. And if that content has been taken down, if those content creators have been taken down, is that to protect me? So if a content creator is saying something like, koala bears are behind, um, some war, or something. It's the rising up of the koala bears. Believe me, believe me. Oh my goodness, these koala bears, they're so violent and they've been out to get humanity forever. And somebody wants to spread that narrative. Do we think that that's going to get taken down? It's so preposterous and there's nothing to back it up. There's no threat there because that type of thinking, something so outlandish with nothing to back it up, is preposterous. So there's no threat. But if somebody is saying something and it's preposterous, but there's evidence to back it up, what might happen to control the narrative? So when your perception is controlled, your beliefs become controlled, and the actions that stem from your beliefs and your perception are manipulated and they are controlled. It is much easier to get a lot of people to do what very few want them to do if they can control what they think. And so, perhaps at some point, we might get to a point where people are controlling our perceptions. And that is the true war. That would be the true war that would be happening behind the scenes. That would be a spiritual and an energetic war. And if we refuse to think critically, to think for ourselves, and to consider information that on the surface might seem preposterous, but we allow ourselves to consider it and to look at any evidence that might be behind that type of preposterous narrative, then we have the ability to critically think. And so we also want to be really careful about our policing amongst ourselves, because it's one thing for us to just be censored because some invisible hand is doing it. Some Orwellian future is controlling it. But what happens is when our perception gets hijacked, when we really fall prey to the narrative that is not true, but is what is being sold, then we start to police each other. And then that leads to that ostracization or being ostracized, being excluded, being ridiculed, and being shunned by community, by peers, by family. And that ultimately leads to us censoring ourselves, not being willing to stand up and speak for what is true, what is right, what is authentic, what is for our highest good. We quiet ourselves so that we don't become ostracized, so that we aren't excluded. Again, not from the powers that be, but from each other. And this is where that ability and that willingness to just hold discourse, to hold space, withhold judgment when views are presented to you, to us, that are not in accordance with our current beliefs. It doesn't mean that you have to adopt the views of everybody. It doesn't mean you have to agree, but being willing to just allow other people to have their own opinions, because the truth is that we are way more united and have way more in common with each other than we do have differences. But the differences that we have, so if we think about it from across the political spectrum, of course, there are some very key points that get agitated, that really get stirred up. And we start to see an enemy. We start to feel defensive. We start to feel self righteous. And so it's really important that we recognize these shadow aspects that we are all holding within ourselves, to recognize it, to see it for what it is, and to recognize that it is operating our subconscious. It is creating anger within us. It is creating separation within us. It's creating violence within us, possibly, hopefully, not outward violence, but violent thoughts, violent words. And it is it is separating us. And there is a potential in an alternative dimension that that is used against us as humans, as a human collective. We must overcome our tendencies to separate ourselves. We must be in unity, be in acceptance, be in forgiveness, to work within ourselves to recognize that propensity to separate ourselves, to judge, and how that could work in the favor um, of a larger agenda that is not in our highest good. That is not our highest path forward. Our highest path forward is to step into a new level of spiritual maturity, to have open discussion, heartfelt discussion, looking for commonalities and not expecting mirrors and echoes in every single person. When we become more spiritually mature, we do not need to have a constant reflection of every belief in every voice that we hear. We aren't threatened by that. We know who we are, and we allow, and we don't get so defensive, and we don't ostracize. I know it's easier said than done, but if you know the potential of what could happen, what could be happening in another realm, another dimension, then you will see a bigger picture of what is happening to us and do what you can as an individual to offset it. Because it starts with every single one of us. So thank you so much for watching, for listening. I bless you, and I will see you next time.